Mark had always thought of his marriage to Clara as a masterpiece. He was the sturdy, reliable frame, and she was the vibrant, captivating canvas. For 12 years, their life together seemed picture perfect. They had a beautiful home in the suburbs, two bright kids, and a rhythm to their lives that felt comfortable and secure. Mark worked as an architect, a job that demanded precision and patience, qualities he brought home with him. Clara was a freelance graphic designer, full of creative energy and a social grace that Mark admired. She was the one who filled their home with laughter and friends. Lately, though, a strange, almost imperceptible smudge had appeared on their perfect canvas. It started with small things. Clara began working late more often, her deadlines suddenly becoming more demanding. "It's this new international client," she'd explain, her eyes tired but her smile bright. "Huge project, Mark. It could be a game changer for me." He believed her, of course. He was her biggest supporter. He'd handle the kids' dinner, help with homework, and have a cup of tea waiting for her when she finally came home, smelling faintly of a perfume he didn't recognize. "Oh, I tried a sample at the mall today," she'd say breezily, dismissing his curiosity. Then came the phone calls. Clara, who used to leave her phone lying around carelessly, now guarded it like a state secret. It was always on silent, face down on the table. Once, he picked it up to pass it to her, and she flinched, snatching it from his hand with a nervous laugh. "Sorry, just expecting a really important work email," she'd said. The excuses were always plausible, always related to her burgeoning career. Mark, a man who built his life on logic and trust, accepted them. Why wouldn't he? This was Clara, his Clara. The first real crack in the facade appeared on their anniversary. Mark had planned a surprise dinner at the restaurant where he had proposed. He'd arranged for a babysitter and bought a beautiful sapphire necklace, the color of her eyes. That afternoon, she called him. "Mark, honey, I am so sorry," she'd whispered, her voice strained. "The client just moved up the final presentation. 2 tonight. I have to pull an all-nighter. I feel terrible." Disappointment washed over Mark, but he pushed it down. "It's okay, love," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We'll celebrate this weekend. Knock 'em dead." He spent their anniversary eating takeout alone, the small velvet box sitting on the table opposite him. That night, something nagged at him. An architect's instinct for when a structure is unsound. He decided to do something he'd never done before. He opened their shared phone records online, telling himself he was just checking for overages. His eyes scanned the list of numbers. Most were familiar, but one number appeared over and over again at all hours. Late-night calls, early morning texts. It wasn't her boss's number, or her best friend's. A cold dread began to pool in his stomach. This wasn't a client. This was something else. Instead of confronting her, Mark chose a different path. His patience, the very tool he used to design magnificent buildings, would be the tool he used to understand the truth of his own life. He wasn't going to explode in anger. He was going to watch, listen, and wait for the foundations of her story to crumble under their own weight. He started paying closer attention. He noticed how her stories had tiny inconsistencies. One day, a client dinner was at a fancy Italian place downtown. The next week, she mentioned the same restaurant but claimed she'd never been there. He noticed she'd come home from a yoga class without a hint of sweat, her hair perfectly styled. The test came a month later. Mark told Clara he had to go on a 3-day business trip to Chicago for a site inspection. "Oh, that's a shame," she said, her expression a perfect blend of sympathy and support. "But you go do your thing. I'll hold down the fort." He packed his bag, kissed her and the kids goodbye, and drove to the airport. But he didn't get on a plane. He checked into a small hotel near their home. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. He was just an observer, he told himself, collecting data. The first night he saw her car leave the house around 8 p.m. Using a location-sharing app he'd installed on their family tablet weeks ago, under the guise of Safety. He tracked her. The signal stopped at a sleek downtown bar, not an office building. Mark's hands trembled as he drove there, parking across the street. A little while later he saw her. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting on the arm of a man who was definitely not her client. They looked comfortable, intimate. They looked like a couple. The sight was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He sat in his car for an hour, watching the woman he loved build a new life in front of his very eyes. He didn't storm in. He just drove back to his hotel, the image burned into his mind. The next day, he continued his surveillance. He saw her and the man having lunch, walking hand in hand through a park. They looked happy, carefree. The lies were no longer just smudges. They were a completely different painting, one he had never been allowed to see. He had all the evidence he needed, a blueprint of her betrayal, detailed and undeniable. When he returned home from his trip, Clara greeted him with a warm hug. "We missed you so much. How was Chicago?" she asked, her eyes clear and bright. Mark looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in a long time. He saw the practiced smile, the carefully constructed facade. The masterpiece was a forgery. "Chicago was illuminating," he said, his voice calm and even. He walked past her into the living room and placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside were printed photos. Photos from the bar, from the park. Photos of her lies. Clara's face went white. The performance was over. The vibrant canvas was suddenly blank. "Mark, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. There was no plausible excuse left. No client, no deadline. Just the quiet, patient man who had finally seen the truth. "I think," Mark said softly, the architect ready to demolish a structure that could no longer stand, "we need to talk about your new project." His patience hadn't just exposed her lies. It had given him the strength to calmly face the ruins of his marriage and decide what he was going to build next, on his own. Thank you so much for watching this story. Sometimes the quietest people see the most, and patience can be the most powerful tool of all. If you connected with this story, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more content. We'll see you in the next one.